Let's take a closer look at how to write the null and alternative hypotheses. So a hypothesis has four parts to it. The first part is identifying which hypothesis you have, the null or the alternative. You do that by writing an H with either a 0 next to it for the null or an A next to it for the alternative. Then you need to tell us what part of the population you're working with. And in this case, we're working with the population mean. So we're going to use the Greek letter mu. And then after that Greek letter mu, the population mean comes a sign either equal to, less than, greater than, not equal to, and then a value or a number. So let's start with the null hypothesis. The null hypothesis, so H with a 0 next to it, is mu is equal to a number or a value. So it's a claim for a specific value. And in terms of picture-wise, as we're building this distribution out, we're using that normal distribution, and we're always going to center our normal distribution at whatever value we have for the null hypothesis. Okay, so that's what we have going here. And then we have three types of alternative hypotheses. The first kind is the one-tailed test. So we're either looking at the left tail or the right tail, so the left or the right side of the distribution. So if we're looking at a left tail test, then our alternative hypothesis, so H with an A next to it, is that the mean mu, the population mean, is less than whatever number we used for the null hypothesis. So it's a claim of less than, and it's a left tail test or a one-sided test. If on the other hand, you think that the null hypothesis is set too low, you think the value is actually greater than that null hypothesis, then we're looking at a right tail test. So our alternative hypothesis, H with an A next to it, is that the population mean mu is greater than a number. So it's greater than that number that we used in the null hypothesis. So our claim is greater than, and we're looking at a right tail test, and this is also a one-sided test. All right, and then the last one is our two-tail test. And so if you're not sure whether it's less than or greater than, you're just convinced that whatever the null hypothesis is wrong, then you're usually going to wind up in a two-tail test. So your alternative hypothesis, H with an A next to it, is that the population mean does not equal that number. So an equal sign with a slash through it. And so this is a claim of different than or not equal to or just not that value. And we call this a two-tail test. So one thing to note about the two-tail test, it does account for both less than and greater than. So we're looking at both tails, which makes it harder to show a change because you're going to have twice as much probability there because you have to account for both the less than and greater than. All right, come back in the next video. We'll take a look at some practice for writing these hypotheses.